So I was studying ancient Chinese philosophy, and all of a sudden I came across this principle that not only changed my intimate relationship and the way that I communicate, but it also helped me to communicate way more effectively with so many other people, and it has saved me a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of sleepless nights. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about this ancient philosophy that I came across that helped me to save my marriage, save many chaotic relationships. It's helped me to communicate more effectively. And in fact, I think it'll probably help most of you out there in your intimate relationships, friendships, and also in your business as well. If you don't know who I am, I'm Michael Mojo. I'm the owner of Mojo Human Performance Institute. We focus on business, mindset, and lifestyle hacking for driven mofos. And the reason why I do these is that most people waste their life, and I just don't want you to be one of them. So how this all came about was I was studying ancient philosophy back many years ago, probably 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago. I still study a lot of philosophy. In fact, I read philosophy most nights before I go to bed because during the day I'm very logical and very analytical, and I tend to stick to scientific or logical principles. And then at nighttime, I like to open up my brain and expand and challenge myself a little bit. So anyway, I'm studying ancient Chinese philosophy and I'm reading some books on it. And I came across this principle of yin and yang. And what that meant was that in the dark side, there is also light, but also the dark side needs the light side, and the light side also contains dark within itself. It's almost like the principle that there are two sides to every coin, but there's only one coin. Very similar principle. Okay. Now, what that means is that if one side expands, so does the other side. You can't have good without bad. You can't have bad without good. You can't have dark without night. You can't have night without dark, because everything is just shades of the same principle, just on different parameters or opposing sides. So anyway, I'm reading through this and I came across this principle of masculine and feminine energy. Now, at first I was like, oh, I don't really know too much about this. I thought masculine means men and feminine means females. And that was my ignorance at first because I hadn't really studied this stuff before and I didn't really understand it. And over time, what I started learning was that this concept of masculine and feminine has nothing to do with gender, as in when I say gender, I mean sex. That doesn't have anything to do whether someone has male anatomy or female anatomy or anything else. What it means is that there is this principle of this idea of what is feminine and what is masculine. Now, masculine had certain principles, and so if you look at Chinese philosophy, they call masculine energy, they say it's part of the fire energy or the fire element. And also, depending on the philosophy, it could be either the air element or it could be the wood element. Now, let me explain before it sounds like I'm way off. I guarantee this principle will probably change the way that you communicate. But let me explain this because normally when I explain it in my events, sometimes people lose their shit or they get all confused and they start fucking spazzing out a little bit. And I don't want anyone to do that. So stay with me here while I explain it and try to build the foundations of this principle because it's a game changer. So let's go back to it. Masculine is fire. And also it could be an air element or it could be a wood element, depending on the different philosophy that you're studying. Then it says that feminine energy is a nurturing energy, and so it's more of a water energy or a water element and an earth element. Now, let me give some examples of this. Normally, if you have two very masculine males, now I'm using males as people with male anatomy, but they are more masculine in their nature. They can flare up really quickly, just like a fire can flare up and then it can die down really quickly. Whereas feminine energy, if you have a person who is more feminine in their natural energy, they can be upset for a period of time, because earth energy means that it can be sunshine one day and then the next day it can be raining and gale force winds, and it might be raining and gale force winds for a couple of days. It might even be a week. And so the Chinese and many ancient cultures used to use these philosophies in order to understand things, and that's why it's there. It's a philosophy, it's a construct. It doesn't mean that it's scientifically proven, it's just a construct. And I'll explain how it helps me to communicate and how it probably saved my marriage, and also how it made me a way better communicator with my wife, Jess. And it might save your relationship too. It might also be the thing that helps you to have greater understanding in your relationships with people. So fire energy flares up really quickly. It dies down really quickly. It's also warm consistently. So I know I normally sweat a lot more, and Jess calls me the toaster because when I get in bed at nighttime, I'm normally hot and I kick the covers off. Whereas, in this time of year, it's winter, she's freezing. She's normally in like a onesie and then a big quilt, and she's freezing all the time. So she calls me a natural heater. Now, the ancient philosophy would say that I'm more masculine in my energy compared to Jess because I'm more fiery and warm. Also, I don't hold on to things that long. I flare up when I need to, and then I die down pretty quickly. So I don't really hold on to stress or anger or anything like that for too long. But when I do, it's very aggressive at first, and then it calms down quite a lot. Jess, on the other hand, is more feminine in her energy. if we're, going by this philosophical construct, which means that she's normally cold. She's cold all the fucking time. Even in the middle of summer, it's 40 degrees, and she'll say, should I take a jumper? And I say, just in case, because I know that she's naturally cold consistently. That's her water energy or her water element. Now, water can be calm and flat one day and wavy the next. And that can also relate to female menstrual cycles as well. Normally, that's very symbolic of feminine hormones or female hormones. And then you've also got earth energy, which means it can be beautiful and radiant one day, sun shines, everything's beautiful. And I know some days I wake up and I look at Jess and she's smiling and she's buzzing and she's radiating this energy. And then the next day, for I don't know what reason, she can be a bit off. And that's not nothing good or nothing bad. It's just that her natural energy means that she has some days or even a couple of days where she's just flat and doesn't know why and feels a bit down and questions things. And that's more of her natural feminine energy. Now, feminine energy is also a healing energy. So when you're tired and burnt out, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, you will naturally become more feminine in your energy because it's a nurturing energy. Masculine energy, on the other hand, is very fiery and very aggressive, and males and both females will have this energy. And that's why gender is almost irrelevant when you're talking about feminine and masculine energy. Now, let's get to the point. How did this help my communication? Well, what I started noticing pretty quickly was that when I understood this principle, I realized that most of the time my communication was very short, sharp, and concise, which was very symbolic of masculine energy. Also, I would be very, very firm in my opinions and in my views, which is very much the wood element. Now, if you imagine a tree is very rooted into the ground. So it doesn't like to change its decisions. It's very decisive, but when it decides, that's the way that it is. And that can be seen as being very stubborn. But a tree is very stubborn, hence the wood energy. Now, what I also noticed was that masculine energy communicates very concisely, very direct, and is very purposeful in most cases in communication. Whereas feminine energy is like a bit of a river. It can go in one direction and then change all of a sudden, then go back in a different direction and change all of a sudden. And so a lot of the time, originally, before I noticed this, I would just say to Jess, get to the point, because I thought that she was all over the shop, couldn't communicate effectively and all this. But it was just that in those moments, she was communicating through her emotions, and emotions are like a wave. They go up and down. And so a lot of the time when somebody is feminine, they won't be concise in their communication. They will be communicating in the way that they feel in that moment. And people can change how they feel moment to moment. They can be happy one second, feel flat the next, feel excited the next, feel down the next. And so most people go through different emotions when they're communicating, especially if they're emotional. And so what this taught me was to be patient with Jess, that when she was communicating, instead of rushing her and telling her to get to the point, she would then shut down, internalize how she was feeling, and then that would eventually build up and explode out of her in, this volatile communication that would come out in fucking crazy ways that I didn't even understand, and I'd get blamed for things and which she wasn't really doing. It's just that she wanted me to understand how she felt. Now, for the people who are naturally feminine who are listening to this podcast, you're probably thinking, well, no shit. But as someone who has communicated for a very long time in more of a masculine way, in most cases, not all times, because I definitely go feminine sometimes when I'm burnt out and when I'm tired, or even when I just need to rest and I need to rejuvenate myself. I didn't realize that was causing her to shut down and suppress her emotions and how she felt about things. And what it would also do was cause her to disconnect because she felt like I didn't understand her, or I didn't understand how she was feeling. Now, normally when two masculine people communicate, they communicate very precisely. They communicate about a problem and then they solve the problem. If you do that with feminine energy, so when someone is feminine and they're expressing how they're feeling, they're not saying solve my problem. They're just saying at the moment, I feel stressed, I feel unhappy, I feel upset. I feel like you don't look after me. I feel like, we're disconnected. And so normally their words don't make so much of a difference in their communication. Their emotions do. So it's really, really important that if you're naturally someone who's more masculine, you need to stop and try to understand how they feel by connecting with them, not by being distant and trying to solve their problems. Because when you do that, this is the number one bit of feedback you'll get. You don't listen to me. And I would say that the majority of people that I know who are business-minded and are fairly driven people, they will normally hear from their partner, you don't listen to me. You don't understand. You don't get me. And it's because what their partner's saying is, I've been trying to express to you how I feel emotionally, but you're not feeling me. And so it's not so much listen. The word isn't listen, it's feel. And I used to hear, because I'm masculine and I'm very literal in my communication, when Jess would say to me, you're not listening, I would go, of course I'm listening. And I would repeat back the words that she said to me. And she would go, no, but that's not what I mean. And I would go, well, what the fuck do you mean? Normally, if someone who's masculine says that it's red, that normally means that it's red. When someone's feminine, They might be saying, I'm stressed and I'm tired and I'm burnt out and you're never home and you don't care about us and you work all the time and you prioritize work more than us. And if you just stop and you feel what they're feeling, you go, wow, they're feeling like they're unsupported at the moment. And so it's not so much about the words, it's about the feeling. When I realized this, it changed my relationship, because sometimes Jess will be communicating in ways where I just stop, and you have to stop, because as a masculine person, I want to get shit done. I want to achieve things. I want to solve problems. I want to do very logical stuff that happens in sequences. And if I can solve this problem, then it fixes this. And that's a very logical masculine way of doing things. So I had to teach myself to just stop. When I would notice that she was a bit off or different and she would be trying to communicate, I would just sit there and I would just feel what she was feeling, or I would try to feel what she was feeling, because it's hard to tune into someone else's feelings, but I don't know any other way to describe it. But I would just stop and be present with her. I guess that's the best way of saying it. And I would stop being so logical in my head and trying to solve problems. And so when she would say things like, you work all the time, you care more about your business than you do me, I would just let her go until she had finished getting everything off of her chest. And I would say, I completely understand, honey, and it's my fault. I haven't given you the attention that you need, and I haven't been here to support you enough lately. And she would say things like, yeah, I know, it's just hard sometimes because, I do want to connect with you more. And that would be it. I'd give her a hug and, I'd go, right, well, let's book a date night. And then it's over. Whereas when I'd be like, she would go, you're always working and you're never here. And I'd be like, I'm always here because I fucking work from home and you work from home. So therefore I'm always here. And then she'd be like, no, but you don't understand. You're not listening to me. And I'm like, well, fuck, that's what you said. And then she'd go, you give a shit more about the business than you do me. You don't really care about me. And I'm like, I care about you. That's why I work. And she'd be like, no, but you're not listening to me. And I'm like, what the fuck is this crazy person talking about? I don't understand. Because normally I was treating her communication style like masculine people treat their communication style, which is very logical. Now, when I've expressed this in front of other people who are more feminine, they're like, no shit, that's exactly what she was communicating. So people who are feminine get feminine communication styles. Now, logical people get logical communication styles. So I have some friends of mine who are more feminine, and let's just say their partner was out and they go out consistently with work, and they would sit there and they're like, well, he said that, he had to stay back late for this meeting. What else is going on? I'm like, well, I don't know. What did he say? And she's like, well, I know he's probably working, but, he's probably doing something else as well. Well, what else could he be doing? And I'm like, there's nothing else hidden in that. He's probably just fucking working. The person would say something along the lines of, well, the other night he got home and I could tell that there was something wrong, but he said that there was nothing wrong. So, there's got to be something wrong. And I'm like, there's probably nothing wrong. It's probably he's just thinking about work. She's like, no, but there's got to be something else. Because what happens is normally in feminine communication, there's more to the communication than what meets the eye. That's why normally when I'm working with someone who's masculine who comes to consult with me, and let's say I've worked with people who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars and they come to me and they're about to get a divorce and they're like, I don't fucking understand what's going on. Why don't they just say what they mean? I'm like, because they're feminine. They are saying what they mean. They just do it in a different way. Essentially, it's like saying, why doesn't a Chinese person speak French? And why doesn't the French person speak Chinese? Like, because they speak different languages in different countries. And although you can learn how to do that, your native tongue isn't that. So you have to learn how to do it. Just like people who are masculine communicators need to learn how to understand the feminine communication style. And the feminine communication style also needs to understand the masculine communication style. So if you're communicating with someone who's masculine, they say there's nothing wrong, it probably means that there's nothing wrong. When someone says, I just need some space, and they're masculine, what they mean is, I need some fucking space to think through some stuff. Whereas a feminine person, if they say, I need some space, there's more to that communication. It might be, I'm stressed, I'm upset, I feel disconnected, I don't know what's going on, I'm confused. There could be so many other parts to that communication. And this is why when someone says in a relationship who's feminine, when they say, leave me alone, and you're masculine, you go, okay, and you walk away from that, they sit there and they go, you piece of shit. You walked away from me when I was upset. I had all this stuff going on. You didn't even care about how I feel. And they will blast you with that later. And I have people come to me, they're like, well, she said that there was nothing wrong. And I'm like, you fucking idiot. Of course there's something wrong, because they're communicating in a feminine communication style. Now, like I said, both males and females can be masculine or feminine. Masculine energy, as I mentioned before, is fire energy, or the fire element, and a wood element. So fire flares up and it's warm and can die down really, really quickly, just like a bonfire, or a bonfire can flare up quick and die down and can burn out real quick. Also, wood, a tree doesn't move, so it doesn't like to change its opinions or change its mind very easily. That's why sometimes as a coach, it can be very hard working with people who are very masculine, because they can be very stubborn. Now, someone who's very feminine can be very flowy and in their flow, and they're very cooling and very calming, especially to the fire energy or the fire element. They also can be very earth energy or very earthy, which means they can be very radiant and beautiful, just like when the sun shines out and you open the blinds in the morning, you're like, fuck yeah, I'm alive. But then the next day it can be gale force winds and it can be raining and thunderstorms and you go, oh, today's a bit rough. Now that can also happen with feminine energy, but they all balance each other out. That's the beauty in it. And we all have times of masculine and we all have times of feminine. So it doesn't matter what your sex is. So it doesn't matter whether you're a male or a female or whatever you identify with. It just means that it's a philosophical construct that people used thousands of years ago to try and understand how nature worked before the scientific principles came in. But what it did was it gave me an understanding of how to understand communication styles differently. And it's helped me massively in business because if one of my staff is burnt out, they will normally start expressing the feminine communication style where they start to communicate in non-logical ways, which are more based on their feelings and their emotions and what's going on inside of them and those sort of things. And it can be a bit erratic sometimes also. It can be, yeah, everything's fine. And then 2 minutes later, it's like, fuck, the shit's hit the fan and they're all crazy and they're all upset. And I go, okay, cool. Maybe they're burnt out. Maybe they've been burning for too long. Maybe they've got other stuff that's going on. And maybe, I just need to sit with them and just ask them some questions and understand how they feel. Then on the other hand, I can have people that are very masculine and very driven and very purposeful and very aggressive in the way that they're doing things. And sometimes I've got to be careful with them because they can burn out because they don't have enough healing or nurturing energy, which is that feminine, earth, radiant, beauty energy that ancient philosophies or the ancient constructs used to use to understand that. Really hope this helped. It might sound like I'm rambling a little bit, but if you go through and pick out the good bits, I just really wanted to share because it made a massive difference. Even 2 days ago, there was a point where, Jess seemed a bit flat and a bit off for the day, and I know she'd been working for like 14 days straight and I didn't pick up on it, and I'd taken the day off a couple of days earlier. Well, actually I don't take days off, but I was just doing different stuff and wasn't working so much in the business that day. I just noticed that she was a bit off, and later that day I noticed that she was just starting to pick on things and just having a bit of a dig at things, and so I got a bit frustrated and I had a couple of words to her and then all of a sudden, she had a couple of words back and was, telling me about how, business is fucked and nothing's working and everything's shit and, no one cares and no one helps her. And then I was like, I know what I missed. Okay. I missed that she was communicating in her feminine. And so I just sat there and I listened and she told me how shit everything was and how bad everything was and, going around in circles. And I was like, okay, cool. I understand. Like she feels burnt out. She feels like she's not getting any support. She feels like I haven't been there for her and I haven't asked her how she feels because she's been just going flat out. She's been very masculine in her drive. And so when I just sat there and I listened to her, I just said to her, you've been working really hard, haven't you, honey? And she said, yes, I have. And I said, and you haven't had a lot of support lately, have you? And she went, no, I haven't. And I said, and sometimes everyone else in the team hasn't, doesn't ask you how you're going because you just go flat out. And she said, yeah, I know. It just feels like no one supports me. And I said, I completely understand. How about this? How about I just book the whole day off for you tomorrow and the day after, and you spend some time doing whatever you want, whether it's resting and sleeping, no alarms, and you can get up and do some art. She's an amazing artist, so she does fucking amazing portraits. She's also writing a screenplay at the moment, so she's amazingly creative in what she does outside of the business. And so I said, what about you do some more creative stuff, which is very feminine? And so she did that. And straight after that, she was on absolute fire. 2 days later, she's like a completely different person. It's like you've re-put the batteries in and she's off and ready to rock and roll. But it was that I picked up that communication style that she was just burnt out. Now, I do that sometimes as well. When I'm burnt out, I will start communicating more of a feminine way where I start feeling maybe a bit stressed, a bit burnt out. I start complaining about things and she normally picks up on that and just says, maybe you just need a bit of a rest, maybe have an early night. And she does it really, really well. I think normally I won't say all females, but I'm not sure if it's, a biological thing where females are more attuned to how people feel because maybe, naturally, intrinsically, that thing of being more of a mother and more maternal. I'm not sure, by the way, so please don't fucking attack me online for this because these are just some ideas. And I have read research papers on this stuff as well, but there's different, conflicting ideas. That may be because they're more maternal. They pick up on these subtle cues that people have in communication styles and, in emotional states and so on. So women tend to be more finely tuned to it than most men, just from what I've seen. And that's why I think that females in general are probably a bit better understanding how others feel and maybe being a bit more empathetic and compassionate and all that stuff than people who tend to be more masculine in their nature, or men just in general. I would be keen to hear what you think as well. So please feel free to comment on these videos. Please let me know if this helps as well. So if you haven't already done so, please jump across to my Facebook page, which is Michael Mojo 00 on Facebook. You can also find me at Michael Mojo 00 on Instagram, and that is MICHAEL M0, the number, J0, the number, and then OO as in the letters. Okay, so that's my Instagram thread. Also jump across onto YouTube as well. I am going to be dropping some brand new extended trainings in the coming week. So if you want to jump across and you're a business owner or you're someone who wants to understand more about human behavior, please jump across, because I am going to be dropping some extended trainings on there for free, which I normally charge for. So please jump across and make sure you hit that subscribe button. But I would love to hear what you think about this concept as well, and these constructs. Are they still relevant today? Are they not relevant? All I know is that they help me to communicate more effectively. So whether it's because principles are scientific or not, I don't know. They just help me to communicate and understand things way, way better since understanding that philosophy. And I hope someone out there learns something from this chat as well, because I know that there's a lot of people out there who fuck up their relationships because of their communication, and not understanding the other person's communication style is normally different. And if you just look at the idea of the yin and yang principle, it's normally that someone who is more masculine will attract someone who's more feminine, and someone who's more feminine will attract someone who's more masculine. And that doesn't matter whether it's a homosexual or heterosexual relationship. It normally just is what it is, because it seems to be, I don't know, some sort of a biological construct that the ancients picked up on thousands of years ago. And it still tends to be fairly relevant as well. It's pretty obvious when you just watch relationships. Some people tend to be a bit more androgynous, which means a bit more balanced in their relationships as well, where they sort of are a bit of both. And that's very quite normal as well. But normally opposites attract. And the more polarized or charged one person is in the masculine, the more they'll attract someone who's highly feminine. And you'll see that at extremes. And you can see that in most relationships. Whereas some people are a bit more balanced. I think Jess and myself are a bit more balanced. I mean, I'm definitely more masculine. She's definitely more feminine most of the time in our natural energies. I know Jess has to go back to her feminine a lot more, but I also know that when she's very, very driven, she'll just keep going until she burns out, and then that throws her back into her feminine. So I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you think. Jump across to my social threads as well. Shoot me a comment. Let me know what you think. As I mentioned, I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I would love to hear from you. And if you're not on TikTok as well, Michael Mojo 00, I drop videos daily as well. So please jump across there and check them out. Anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. And the reason why I do this is that most people waste their life, and I just don't want you to be one of them. Anyway, driven mofos, never underestimate the dream. Keep living with Mojo.